So we're going to make one more right here, but before I do that, I'm going to probably freeze one side. So I'll use the freeze brush. And let's use the closed spline in draw mode. I'm going to right click to create a hard point there. Click twice because I have B splines chosen. Now if I uncheck that, I only have to right click once because again it's cycling between the different point types, and if I'm starting with a regular spline, then the next point type is hard edge, and then after that it's B splines. Hit escape. And I'll hit the enter key. Hit escape again. So now I'll step over here and I will choose something like clay. Actually, let me go back to the freeze brush. I'll use just a regular brush draw mode. Okay, hold the shift key and I can smooth. It's a bit too harsh. If I want, I can go to the freeze menu and either smooth or sharpen. So let's smooth the freezing. I'm going to delete this part here. Ignore back faces is unchecked. I'll just use, let's try plugging on a lasso. Hold down the control key. Like build. Let's crank our fall off up. Let's go to our freeze brush here and hold down shift key. Oops. Let's hit escape. Use a regular brush. Shift. I don't like that. So with the freeze brush, I'm actually going to just go ahead and hold down the control key and erase some of this. Or drop the selection by hitting Control D. And let's use the polish preset. Use this draw brush, which is a variation of the standard. And hold down the control key. Okay, let's go to our pinch brush. Steady stroke. I'm going to hit the S key to turn symmetry back on. I'll go ahead and create a seam right here. Let's try and turn the steady stroke back on. So I'm going to right click and drag down to reduce the depth of value to 0. And I'm just going to pinch. I'm going to increase my brush. Just to pull everything together. Okay, so it's a little bit off over here. Let's turn symmetry off for the moment. I'll drag up. Turn steady stroke off. Right click and drag all the way down, increase my brush size. I'm just going to pinch everything. Right click and drag up, steady stroke. Let's turn it on, crank it up. So now let's go to the models palette and we can add some buttons very quickly. I'll create a new layer and just going to make this a surface mode layer rather than voxels. And we can try to look in the models palette and see if we have something that we can use as a button and maybe sculpt them if we want. But you should have in the cloth directory at least one button, I believe, by default. A lot of these are my own additions, but you should have at least one, I believe. It might be the one with the 4 holes, and I think there's another one too. I'm going to use one that I modified, and I made sure it was low poly so that your performance stays fairly brisk during the process. If you happen to click on a model that's pretty high poly in the hundreds of thousands or millions, and you try to use the primitives tool, which is pretty powerful in that you can create a freeform deformation object on the fly. You can use click to place to quickly align it, but again, it's a little bit more sensitive to the poly counts. If you've got a high poly count, you may sit and wait a while for it to generate, again, because it's applying a freeform deformation lattice. But in this case, I'll just go ahead and click on the object here. I made sure this one was low poly when I drag and dropped it into the models palette. It's only about 25K. So I can choose on brush. And I'm seeing a preview of how it's going to be placed. So I can reduce my brush size. And it's going to try and orient it. You can see if I move it around, it's going to try to orient that object along the normals of the surface. All right. So as you right click and drag left and right to scale your brush, you can see how that changes the size. So I'm going to invoke my color palette, what's used to be called the color picker or image picker. I'm going to expand that a little bit. I have a hotkey assigned to that. You could dock it if you like. But in this case, you see it doesn't go all the way down. It kind of stops about midway, but that's fine. So let's go ahead and click here. So that's one. You can already see that the button is embedded into the cloth a little bit too deep. So I'm going to undo. And you'll notice as I raise the brush intensity, the depth, that will push it away from the surface. Let's go with something like that. I'll click. It's a little bit too far away. So right click and drag down. That's about right. Probably a few fingers width. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball it from here. If I want, I could use the measure tool if I want to be especially precise. That way I can create pre-measured segments. In this case, I'm just going to eyeball it. Let's change the shader. All right, I think that looks pretty good for the time being. We're now going to move on to the next stage of this project, and that is recreating the pants from scratch. We'll do that in the next video, so stay tuned and thank you for watching.